of me when you are all alone. Maybe the one who's waiting for you will prove untrue. Then what will you do? Maybe you sit and sigh, wishing that I were there. Maybe you'll ask me to.
War. War never changes. Since Cain struck down his brother Abel, man has had a lust for violence and blood that has gone unchecked for centuries, building weapons and armies out of the very earth he walks upon. In the year 2077, the world could no longer fuel man's crusade against itself, as countries began to fight over what little was left. As a result of man's insatiable fury, the world is bathed in nuclear fire, leaving homes and cities once flooded with people into a barren wasteland. Those who survived did so in great underground vaults. In the years following the war, when the fallout settled, these vaults opened and the dwellers emerged, spreading out across the country, forming groups, tribes, new communities out of the old world. You believe you've seen it all. From the towering ruins of the Boneyard to the murky bogs of Appalachia. But in the wasteland, seldom is anything so simple. There still remains stories untold, secrets yet to be revealed. But some things are certain, unchanging truths out in the wastes. Life is cheap, armies fight over scraps left by the old world, and war never changes. Oh, hey there. Things got a little out of hand since last time. Am I right?
What?
But you know what else is out of hand? The sheer history of Fallout.
Are you ignoring me?
The Fallout series has been around for almost 30 years.
You started the conversation. I don't know why you're ignoring me.
Taking players throughout the irradiated wastelands of post-apocalyptic America, and putting the fates of its inhabitants in truly capable hands. Yeah, that tracks. I've been a fan of the series ever since my brother and I first played Fallout 4, a game that I played so much that I can't even go near it without some kind of mod just to vaguely shake things up, or get the Randy Savage out and going, you know what I mean? And I've since gone back to play some of the older titles, and my god, I just cannot get enough of this series. So much so that I was prompted into making a Fallout Iceberg. Look at that. In this video, I'm going to go over bits of lore, fan projects, behind-the-scenes facts and trivia, as well as some potential spoilers for the new Fallout show, so you've been warned. Without further ado, let's get into my Fallout Iceberg, and, let's just try to get a little further than Ed. Black Isle, and Interplay. So starting things off, let's go back to the very beginning with Fallout's original owners. Now the first 2 Fallout games were developed by Black Isle Studios and published by Interplay Productions. In 1997, the first Fallout game was a huge success for both Black Isle and Interplay, selling over 600,000 copies. Needless to say, a sequel was inevitable. And in 1998, Fallout 2 would release, seeing not as great as sales. Yet despite the game garnering a reputation as being one of the best entries in the franchise, the game only sold 123,000 copies, not even half of what the first game sold. So Interplay decided to dust themselves off and take the next game in stride, and so Interplay and Black Isle would go on to develop Fallout Tactics, and it's Fallout Tactics, what do you expect? Now, unfortunately, due to Interplay's financial issues at the time, Tactics would be Black Isle's last Fallout game, as the studio was retired by Interplay. Though members from the company would regroup to form a new studio under the name Obsidian Entertainment, who themselves would go on to make Fallout New Vegas, and that's the game everyone says is the god tier Fallout game. And I'm kind of up there with them. I think it's pretty good. Anyways, Interplay would continue the series for one last entry with Fallout Brotherhood Steel, and that one did kind of worse. This would be Interplay's last Fallout game, and in 2006 the company would go under. And in 2007, Bethesda would purchase the rights to Fallout and continue the series to this day. Okay, now you're caught up on the history. And that's what I would say if we were done here. Oh! So it turns out in 2009, Interplay still had the rights to produce a Fallout MMO and sell the older Fallout games. But Bethesda didn't like that and thought,
"But we were also Fallout, buddy."
And so they decided to sue Interplay. Now keep in mind, the contract that Interplay signed with Bethesda stated that they were allowed to do this, so the lawsuit fails. But then they come back and claim that, okay, you can make a Fallout MMO, but you can't use most of the stuff that makes Fallout Fallout. You can only use the name. But then Interplay pulled out some old emails stating that they could still use a lot of the old IP's assets, like factions and such. So that lawsuit fails. But then they come back in 2012 to sue again. And at this point, Interplay was just in a very bad place, so they finally conceded. And Bethesda gets the rest of Fallout for $2 million. But don't feel too bad for Interplay. From the sound of how they treated Fallout creator Tim Cain, with a lot of homophobic comments directed towards him and other members of the staff, Interplay wasn't the best place to work at, and probably wasn't that great a company, if I'm gonna be retrospective based off these little statements. But that's just a whole other can of worms. Okay, now you're caught up. Tim Cain. Now, Tim Cain is the actual creator of the Fallout series. He's also worked on other games like Arcanum of Steamworks, Magic Obscura, Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines, and The Temple of Elemental Evil. Tim Cain began his career at Interplay as a freelancer, working on a Bard's Tale construction set, a game creation system. After finishing that project, he was fully employed by Interplay in 1991. And this guy has definitely been through it after having to work for Interplay. He also has his own YouTube channel where he shares, not just his thoughts on the development of the earlier Fallout games or his thoughts on the series nowadays, but also his just personal experience with the gaming industry. I would check his videos out if you're interested into that industry insights, and I'll leave a link in the description. Wasteland. Wasteland is another post-apocalyptic RPG, originally created by both Interplay and EA back in January of 1987. Now, Wasteland was a pretty big success, and Interplay was rearing to make a Wasteland 2, but they just could not get the rights from EA, and so they said, alright, fine, we'll get someone else to make our own. And then, Fallout. Yeah, Fallout is actually a spiritual successor to the Wasteland series, and the two franchises would end up sharing quite a few elements with each other, or more, Fallout just adapting certain aspects of the Wasteland series just to make up its own world. Now, with Fallout being a spiritual successor, the two series were bound to have quite a few similarities with each other. For example, the Brotherhood Steel is similar to the Guardians of the Old Order. They're both xenophobic, they love hoarding precious pieces of technology and, your iPods. They're both always deployed in really high-tech combat armor, and they both have a base called the Citadel, which granted the Citadel is more of a Fallout 3 thing, but you get the point. Death Claws are very similar to Shadow Claws, which, that's pretty obvious, not just in the name. It's mostly the name that hangs me up, and the first quest in Wasteland is to find an actual water chip. And they both have desert rangers. Needless to say, we would not have Fallout as we know it without Wasteland. The Creation Engine. The Creation Engine is a video game engine developed by Fallout's new owners, Bethesda. The engine has been in Bethesda's warehouse since 2011 and is based off their old Gamebryo engine. The engine has a pretty infamous reputation amongst both Bethesda fans and just casual gamers as being not the most stable, to say the least, but sometimes it just works. Now, due to the lackluster performance of the engine, as well as many going as far to call it outdated, Bethesda would tip their hats and develop the Creation Engine 2, and nothing changed but the weather. Now, a lot of people have actually gone as far to call the Creation Engine pretty outdated, and have wondered, why hasn't Bethesda updated to a better engine, like Unreal or Unity? And there are two answers to that. One, Bethesda's just way more used to using the Creation Engine, and it'd be a lot easier just to revamp something than having to teach a lot of veterans a new tool to use for all your projects. And seeing that the Creation Engine was responsible for, all these big-time successful games they've made, it's safe to say that they're not too keen on replacing it. But the other reason that Bethesda doesn't ditch the Creation Engine is that the engine itself is pretty mod-friendly. Seriously, none of these other amazing projects that I'm going to talk about later would be possible if they used any other engine. Or at least not to the degree of being straight-up DLC-sized free content. And I will be damned if I cannot give myself a slightly different colored Pip-Boy, for free. FEV. Now, the FEV, or the Forced Evolutionary Virus, is a government-made mutagen developed by the in-universe company, WIZO. Now, the original purpose of the virus was to immunize an entire population from a new plague that began to develop during the pre-war. But the researchers found that the sheer power of this mutagen's genetic modification potential shifted the project from the realm of medicine to one of military applications, which would be a reoccurring theme within the series. The scientists would test this virus over and over, creating a whole slew of genetic abominations roaming the wastes today. Creatures such as snallygasters, centaurs, and of course super mutants. The FEV virus would also act as a pseudo-explanation for most, if not every creature in the Fallout series, due to the Mariposa military base in Fallout 1 being directly hit by one of the bombs, releasing the earliest version of the virus into the atmosphere for it to spread across the world. Or at least, America. And a lot of factions within the Fallout series would end up using the virus one way or another. In Fallout 1, you have the Master trying to make his super mutant army. In Fallout 2, you have the Enclave trying to create a virus using FEV to kill every mutant. In Fallout 3, you would get the Enclave trying to kill everyone with FEV. Again, the Institute would actually use FEV while developing their Gen 3 synths. And in Fallout 76, we would see some scientists trying to use FEV to modify the population of Appalachia. Shmoney. Now, while playing through the Fallout games, you might wonder, why do I have to use bottle caps to buy things? Is it just an aesthetic choice? See, back in the early years of the post-war, there was another war. I know. This war was fought over the fresh reserves of subterranean water sources. See, as you can imagine, in the nuclear holocaust, fresh water is pretty rare, and every surface source of water was contaminated by radioactive particles from the fallouts. Merchants from the hub would fight over the fresh water sources to sell to other towns and communities. These wars would eventually come to an end, and the need for fresh water would only increase in time. Many would trade water for commodities like food, weapons, porn, but carrying around a bunch of individual bottles of water would prove to be a bit of a daunting task. So then traders, and eventually everyone else, would instead use bottle caps to represent the value of water. This would eventually catch on across the country, and Fallout 76 just kind of used it just because. But as time progressed, not everyone in the Wasteland would use bottle caps. The NCR would actually go on to print their own money, as would Caesar's Legion. The only reason you use caps in New Vegas is that neither side rules the Mojave, so their money's no good. Gold is mold and nobody's hungry anymore. VR propaganda. In Fallout 3, the DLC Operation Anchorage, players would enter a military VR chamber meant to safely train up-and-coming recruits. Now, the simulation itself is based in the real in-universe battle for Anchorage, to give recruits a better sense of what kind of meat grinder they're in for. However, various terminals throughout the DLC show that General Chase, the one who was put in charge of the project, made many changes to actual events, and was very much trying to place himself in a far more complimentary light, as well as the US government as a whole. And you know what? I can't say I blame him. Don't we all just want to make something real out of nothing? She's real. She's finally real. Mods. Mods and Fallout pretty much go hand in hand nowadays. For those of you who don't know, mods are unofficial additions for any given game developed by just random people on the internet. They can range from graphical overhauls, quality of life changes, mods that actually fix the bugs of the game, and Randy Savage. I swear, I Slim Jim, I swear! But people don't just stop there. You have incredibly talented teams of people that just come together and make straight up DLC-sized mods just to breathe new life into older titles. And unlike other mega game studios, Bethesda actually allows these projects to exist, even giving some console players the chance to get a little taste of that modding action. Unless you're on PlayStation, then you're like super limited. Sony doesn't allow a lot of modding to any game files. Xbox is a little more chill with it, but Xbox is doing a lot of stuff right now. But any reason to use my Fallout Halo machine is good enough for me. New Vegas developments. After the critical and financial success of Fallout 3, Bethesda wanted to further capitalize on the series' newfound success, but the studio itself was preoccupied developing, just a smaller game, very, very lowbrow, very small, just called Skyrim. But Bethesda still wanted some Fallout money too. So they approached Obsidian Studios, a studio made up of developers who actually worked on the earlier Fallout games. So it was kind of a match made in heaven type deal. Now, New Vegas is considered to be one of, if not the best entry of the series. Now, it took 4 to 6 years to develop Fallout 3. So naturally, Bethesda gave Obsidian 18 months. What the fuck? Granted, some of Fallout 3's assets and gameplay were reused for New Vegas, but needless to say, development time was insane. Especially for how well the game turned out, for the most part. Now, a big part of the deal between Obsidian and Bethesda was that a bonus was promised to the studio if the game got at least a 85% on Metacritic. And so, the game released, it got a shit ton of awards, and it only got an 84 on Metacritic. No bonus for you, you're 1 point off. Despite the game's overall success, because the score was still 1 point off, the studio would not receive a bonus. They also weren't given any sort of royalties for the game, just the straight up payment for development. And if all of this sounds scummy to you, it kind of is. It's business scummy. But that didn't stop fans from wanting another Obsidian Fallout game, which seems a bit more likely considering Microsoft bought both Bethesda and Obsidian, and is kind of hinting towards wanting another Fallout game pretty soon. So hopefully one does happen, and Obsidian's able to get a better deal out of it, and not 2 days to make the game. Now, a lot of people have theorized that Bethesda actually bribed Metacritic into giving New Vegas a low score, but I seriously doubt that. I think that's a little too blatantly scummy for what Bethesda's known for. They got standards, we just haven't hashed them out yet. Talking animals. Okay, I know how this sounds. Just hear me out. Fallout, weirdly enough, has a few instances of talking animals. Some would be in the result of wild mutations, while others would be in direct results of genetic modifications. Many of these talking animals would be seen in Fallout 2, with characters like King Rat and Brain, who were hyper-intelligent mole rats that end up creating a cult in the tunnels below the town of Gecko. Cain was a talking cyber dog that could be recruited as a companion, and one of the most daunting inclusions of Fallout 2 would be the debut of a large pack of intelligent Deathclaws. These Deathclaws were modified by the Enclave in an attempt to create a superior fighting force that didn't require the use of actual Enclave soldiers. They wanted to create a creature that was smart enough to take orders, but not necessarily ask why. One of these talking Deathclaws would actually be able to become a companion who goes by the name Goris. We would also see another remaining intelligent Deathclaw by the name of Zom, who would end up being one of the last intelligent Deathclaws at the end of Fallout 2. Now, you might be wondering, where are all the talking animals now? And that answer is a bit complicated. See, developer John Daly, the guy behind the intelligent Deathclaws, stated that Goris and Zom could have gone off to reproduce with other non-intelligent Deathclaws, but still making offspring that would retain the intelligent genes. But then Chris Avallone, another Fallout vet who was the senior designer for Fallout New Vegas, went on to state that every talking animal died at the end of Fallout 2. So it's kind of unknown whether or not there's still talking animals out in the wastes. Technically, Fallout Tactics was the last time we saw talking Deathclaws, but that game is not canon, so who knows, Bethesda could showcase a talking blowfly tomorrow. But as of now, we're still left wondering. Unseen animals. In the Fallout series, there are quite a few animals that we actually never get to see on screen, or at least not in the usual way. Now, horses are a very interesting and kind of convoluted part in this entry. While yes, horses did exist at one point in the Fallout universe, as evident by the Giddy Up Buttercup toys, they were thought to have gone extinct after the bombs fell. However, in the prequel comic All Roads, there are a few panels showing people riding horses into battle in the wasteland, and not even like mutated ghoul horses, just normal ass horses. Chris Avallone went on to state that their inclusion was error and that nobody caught before it was too late, even going as far as removing certain lines of dialogue in New Vegas itself that actively make references to horses. The NCR is known for the iconic two-headed bear flag, paving the way for wasteland resettlement, but in all the games, we never actually see a two-headed bear itself, and the only closest thing we would get to a mutant bear would be the Yao Guai. Maybe it's just artistic commentary on the nuclear holocaust that the faction finds itself in, or maybe there's actually a two-headed bear out there somewhere. I don't know. Could happen. Pit vipers, along with snakes in general, are mentioned in Fallout 3's DLC, The Pit. The pit vipers are giant mutated snakes that prey on unsuspecting victims. Another species of animals that have gone unseen until the release of Fallout 76 were the seemingly elusive squirrel. For the longest time, fans have only really known this animal for its consumable, that being squirrel on a stick, crispy squirrel bits, and squirrel stew, which I don't. Part of me wants to know what that's like. Finally, a species that still remains unseen to players is the mythical iguana. Like squirrels before 76, we've never really seen iguanas in-universe besides their finger-looking good counterparts, in the form of iguana on a stick or crispy iguana bits. Though I'm sure one day it'll turn out that iguanas are actually these giant mutated Dark Souls bosses that vendors kill on the regular just to make that 3-cap profit. Target Nuka-Cola. Back during the release of Fallout 4, Target began selling Nuka-Cola Quantum. The drink itself was just a blue lemonade soda that, unfortunately, did not glow in the dark or give off any kind of radiation, though, none's keeping you from spiking your drink with a little bit of that plutonium. Get your recommended 2 million calories. None's stopping you. Special and random encounters. The Fallout series has its own fair share of Easter eggs sprinkled all around the overworld. From kids walking around with 2-ton death machines, to a bunch of old ladies wanting to rob you blind. But there's some really out there encounters with games. I'm talking about the talking cows, the alien ship that actually made a constant reoccurrence throughout pretty much every other Fallout game, a Star Trek transport pod, an honest-to-God car dealership, a very familiar phone booth, a guy who's really into NFTs, and this robot that just goes around talking shit. There are a ton more of special or random encounters throughout the rest of the series that would take up a whole video of its own, but I've got other wacky facts to talk about. Vault purpose. The vaults are among one of the most important locations in the Fallout series. In most of the games, they are the starting off point of the main story, the last bastion for humanity when the bombs fell, and the dungeons for holding old world secrets. And while vault-tec would have you believe that its vaults are nothing more than subterranean sanctuaries, many of the vaults were actually built for social or sometimes viral experiments. While there are plenty of other vaults that function as advertised, such as Vault 8, often referred to as control vaults, others would test the very limits of their inhabitants through carefully crafted scenarios. Like in the case of Necropolis, Vault 12 posed the question, what would happen to a population exposed to low levels of radiation? The door for Vault 12 was never closed all the way, causing the population to turn into ghouls. Vault 11 would see if subjects were willing to sacrifice members of their own community to ensure the survival of the majority. And Vault 81 would contain a secret research wing that would develop a universal cure to every disease by exposing an unwitting population to various diseases to test their cure on. However, this plot was sabotaged by the original overseer. Now, vault-tec didn't just do all this for fun, as the Vault program was in cahoots with the series antagonist, the Enclave. Under the name Project Safehouse, the intention was to see how well humanity could survive under certain stressful situations, or something like that. I'm not sure what they were supposed to glean off the puppet vault, but whatever. Needless to say, that many of these vaults proved as some kind of devious intent. And Gary. Pip-Boy modeling kits. Back when Fallout 76 was being released, GameStop was selling an exclusive Pip-Boy 2000 modeling kits. That was advertised as being fun, easy, and full size, and just by going off these instructions, fuck that. It looks like an in-universe type kit, though I will say, it's kind of like not being able to buy an iPhone, so you decide to build a model lookalike instead. I mean, at least it looks cool. Remember GameStop exclusives? That's wild. Anyway. Collector's editions. Okay, let's be real. There's that one collector's edition that makes you get them long eyes, that gets you going all, awooga, humana. Whether it be a funny hammer or 19 inches of venom. And the same has been true for the Fallout series. Ever since Bethesda took over, each edition of the game has had its own fair share of collector's editions, with each one offering all kinds of just wallet-killing fun.
Empty!
Starting off with Fallout 3, this collector's edition came out in a metal lunchbox that came with a copy of the game, obviously, a DVD copy of the making of Fallout 3, a small concept art book, and a Vault Boy bobblehead. You too can go around the schoolyard talking about how you blew up Megaton and explain to the faculty why you're at a schoolyard. You're like 20 something. This is not okay. In Fallout New Vegas, you would actually receive a physical hardcover copy to the prequel comic to the game itself called Fallout All Roads. And obviously this edition came with copies of both the game itself and a making of documentary. It also came with 4 added bonus cards, a replica of the Platinum Chip, a couple poker chips from each of the game's casinos, and a deck of cards so that you can pretend you know how to play Caravan. Which, I mean, I don't need to pretend, I'm already naturally good. For Fallout 4, Bethesda came out with the Fallout Pip-Boy edition. This version of the game came out with a massive Pip-Boy carrying case. That in itself carried a physical steel case copy of Fallout 4, an in-universe Kana instruction booklet for the Pip-Boy, a stand for a Pip-Boy for display purposes, and of course the Pip-Boy itself. Now this massive hunk of plastic was more than just wall decoration, as you're actually meant to wear it while playing the game. See, this Pip-Boy was essentially a arm-mounted phone case, as Bethesda developed an app called Fallout Pip-Boy that would actually connect to your copy of the game and access the in-game inventory, so that you wouldn't have to open a completely different menu. You just gotta look at your wrist, check out what you need, and pray to God you weren't just caught slacking. You too can go around the schoolyard showing off your wasteland survival fit. And then school staff actually have to talk to you for real this time. You came back. We had to call the police. Also, go trying to fit your 17X plus 8G Ultra phone into this thing. See, the Pip-Boy itself is actually meant just to house earlier iPhone 5 to 6s. So unless you have something of comparable size, it's the dreaded controller for you. Or, if you hate yourself, you can just download the app and use it as is on your phone. Whatever floats the leaky boat. Fallout 76. Need I say more of how it was received? Especially for its very controversial collector's edition. See, Fallout 76 came out with something called the Fallout Power Armor Edition. This collector's edition came out with a steelbook copy of the game, but not the game itself, because fuck you. A DLC bonus, a glow-in-the-dark map, 24 collectible minifigures that were lovely shoved into a plastic bag, and actually an honest-to-God wearable T-51 Power Armor helmet, which is the best Power Armor model, in my opinion, especially if you have the right opinion. Now, despite the actual not having an actual physical copy of the game, this all sounds pretty cool, right? Well, when the Power Armor Edition was actually announced, another item was actually promised to come with the game. This was a canvas carrying bag, which was actually meant to house the Power Armor helmet itself. But upon release, a lot of fans were extremely disappointed to see that instead of a high-quality canvas bag, they were actually meant with some cheap-ass nylon from the dollar store. Now, Bethesda's reasoning behind this change was due to material shortages, so they went back and made the change right before release, without actually telling anyone. And considering the state of the game when it came out, and that the collector edition was just a modest $200, you can imagine that a few people were quite pissed when this came out. And after a long, very unnecessarily long process, Bethesda did eventually come back and start offering proper refunds to a lot of people who wanted it, and had started passing out some actual canvas bags to people who demanded the correction. And finally, and more recently, we had the Fallout Special Anthology, a near complete collection of every Fallout game, and Tactics was there too, I guess. And it's actually pretty decently priced at $60 when you buy from Bethesda themselves. However, the games are PC exclusive, so to all my fellow console players, rip. Clay maquettes. Okay, weirdly enough, this topic actually does fascinate me the most. So, back during the development of the original Fallout games back in 1997, CGI wasn't exactly where it was, especially for video games. So to create all the character models that the devs need to make the game, what they did was actually make a series of clay maquettes, both full body and just the heads for little talking roles. Then when these maquettes were made, they were scanned into the computer, and were essentially just remodeled for the game itself. And while this process still happens here and there in the industry, I just find it very fascinating as someone who's very into 3D modeling and animation itself. Thumbs up. Okay, very slight spoiler ahead. So the Vault Boy gave his iconic little thumbs up is definitely one of the most recognizable images in the Fallout series. But when the first games came out, many theorized that the Vault Boy giving a thumbs up was actually just him trying to measure the size of a mushroom cloud. See, the theory goes that if a nuclear explosion happens near you, you hold your thumb up to where the explosion is, and if the cloud is bigger than your thumb, then you're in trouble, but if it's smaller, then you're safe. But the theory was just dismissed as just being a generic pose for the character. But that was until the Fallout show happened, where the character Cooper Howard, or the Ghoul, not only explains what the thumbs up actually means, like the way I just said it, but was also the one to actually popularize it in some of Vault-Tec's earliest advertisements, which was then used for the Vault Boy and C'est La Vie. Definitely a rare instance of a theory just becoming canon, but a cool one for sure. Kellogg on the mind. In Fallout 4, after exiting Kellogg's mind to find a new way into the Institute, the player can approach Nick only to hear Kellogg's voice greeting them. This is all because we had to put a piece of Kellogg's brain into Nick's brain, just to sort of mind leap. It's a whole thing. Inception was cool, I guess. But after that little interaction, Nick takes over with no recollection of what happened or what's happened to him, and that's it. We never actually hear anything about this ever again. A lot of fans still believe that Kellogg is somewhere in Nick's brain. He's just don't want to talk anymore, I guess. But there really is nothing we can actually do for him. As far as I know, there was no cut content or any additional quest where we get Kellogg out of his brain or give him a new body or anything like that. It's just a legit loose thread that was just never addressed. It actually kind of reminds me just a little bit about Harold from Fallout 1, 2, and 3, where the twig on Harold's head, Bob, just progressively gets bigger each game until, it just becomes a tree. So we actually might end up having a similar situation with Nick in a future title, where we had to try to sort out who's who inside his head, but that's just wishful thinking. I don't think it's ever going to be addressed. Fallout Bible. Now, for a lot of movies, TV shows, or video games in this case, there'll usually be the source documents where all the rules of the world and layout and theme are just put together to use for reference. And Fallout is no different. The Fallout Bible is the first collection of documented lore pertaining to the first few Fallout games. The documents are created, written, and released by Fallout's Chris Avellone back in 2002 on Black Isle's original homepage. And for the following 9 years after it's released, the Fallout Bible was the definitive source of everything Fallout. You don't agree on where FEV originated from? Check the Bible. You can't agree about the timeline? Defer to the good book, my guy. You want to know whether or not talking death claws are still a thing? Me too, dude. Just make up your mind. But in 2011, Chris Avellone stated on Twitter that the Fallout Bible was no longer canon, and that only elements from the Bible in Fallout 3 are considered to be canon in the eyes of Bethesda. It's kind of like Star Wars Legend, where Bethesda can pretty much pick and choose what becomes canon. But this doesn't keep plenty of fans from referring to it when faced with a lot of lore problems. And when Fallout 76 came out, there were quite a few. All Roads. Like I mentioned earlier, Fallout All Roads is a prequel comic to New Vegas. Written by Chris Avellone and published by both Bethesda and Dark Horse Comics, this story takes place 1 week before the events in New Vegas begins, and primarily follows Benny preparing to leave the Strip to intercept the Platinum Chip before it gets to Mr. House. The comic acts as a pretty solid companion piece to the game itself, and I would highly recommend it. It's free to read on Imager, and I'll leave a link in the description. Fallout movie. Long before Amazon snatched up the rights to Fallout for the TV show, a Fallout film was actually in the works by Interplay itself. See, Interplay actually formed a studio called Interplay Films back in 1998, with the sole intention of creating 7 films based on the company's most popular IPs. And as the entry implies, Fallout was going to be one of them. The proposed film was written by Brent Freeman, who also had written for Mortal Kombat Annihilation. So, yeah, we're working with that. The film would follow a very similar story to the first game. Fallout 13's water chip starts malfunctioning, leaving a population with X amount of days to survive. So our hero heads out into the wastes to find a new one, only to stumble across the Master and his plot for wasteland domination through mutated, non-irradiated humans. The Master is killed, and the wasteland is forever changed thanks to the actions of our hero. Now this very rough summary does sound like a pretty close one-to-one translation from the base game, but there would have been a ton of big changes to the lore, story, and setting of the world. For instance, the Vault Dweller wouldn't have actually gone alone, he actually would have left with a small team to help him out. The story would have actually had the Master be the creator of FEV after being denied entry into a vault. The story would have taken place 50 years after the bombs fell instead of 80. The film would have taken place in 2003 and not the 2100s like the game itself. A big twist would have been that the Vault already had a functioning water chip, and leadership just sent out the Vault Dweller and associates just to kill off unwanted members of society. Oh, and an even bigger twist is that the Overseer would have actually been the one behind the Great War itself. Oh, and the Great War itself would have just been referred to as World War III, which, I mean, accurate, but just not as fun, I guess. The film would have been pretty different from the source material itself. I can't say for sure whether it would have been good, but it definitely would have been just another entry that some fans would have preferred you forget. Power Armor retcons. Damn, there's a lot of them. Power Armor is one of the biggest staples of the franchise. It's on the cover of most of the games. It's got an entire faction dedicated to just how badass it is. You know, I'm talking about the Atom Cats, babies! Yeah! I wouldn't trust them with like a small animal, is all I'm saying. Needless to say, Power Armor is awesome. It makes its wearer bigger, faster, stronger, and then Fallout 3 came out and it just kind of looks like cosplay. God, look at that hip gap, it's non-existent. You must love the sound of screeching metal. But it was still pretty OP, and add a whole perk requirement to both Fallout 3 and New Vegas, just to keep you from decimating the wastelands a little too soon. But this, as well as many other things, would change upon the release of Fallout 4. Power Armor was given a major rework in Fallout 4, as it acted as a proper mech suit, allowing you to climb in and out without any real experience needed. Which, would definitely become an issue once your settlers started to get a little too comfortable. But this shift in format wasn't the only big change to come. Power Armor's implementation was pretty different, as not only was it very easy to find, but to actually work the thing was a lot harder than just putting it on. After the introduction of fusion cores, which would act as the fuel for the suit so you can actually move around. Which, you can still use it even when you don't have a fusion core, but you're pretty much going at a scuttle's pace. Now these fusion cores were a lot harder to find than the armor itself, and were actually pretty damn expensive to buy from vendors. Now these changes were no doubt due to how Power Armor was used in Fallout 4, as it acted as sort of a pseudo-vehicle power-up item. But, yet again, this wouldn't be the only thing to change for Power Armor, as Fallout 4 would include the introduction of T60 Power Armor. T60 Power Armor would contradict with T51 Power Armor as being the more superior pre-war suits, even though we were led to believe that T51 was that. But even T60 wouldn't be the only iron in this whole lore contradiction, as we would be introduced to the XO1 Power Armor, which was just advanced power armor and everything but the name. This would imply that the Enclave just uses old war army designs for both their tech and arsenal. Now a lot of these issues in Fallout 4 would actually be smoothed over by Fallout 76 of all places, by stating that T60 was just more of a up-armored version of T45 armor, and that the XO1 was simply a prototype designed by pre-war Enclave that saw very limited use in pre-war America, almost exclusively given to military bodyguards, with one exception being a suit given to the Nuka Corporation as a part of Project Cobalt. And the XO1 would be further improved by the Enclave, as we see it in Fallout 1, 2, and New Vegas. While the hate over Bethesda's newer version of Power Armor has died down a bit, some fans still feel the sting for these changes, but at least it embodies the spirit of the Power Armor from the older games. Because, trust me, it could have been way worse to change, is all I'm saying. Vault-tec phone number. In Fallout 3 and 4, Bethesda had to create a vault-tec phone number for players to call in to reserve a place in one of their illustrious vaults. Probably gonna get turned to a goo man or some shit. However, the number is no longer in service, so dialing in isn't possible nowadays. For some, I'm still on hold.
Hey, did you hear something?
Shh, I'm on the phone. Who shot first? Okay, so there's like an actual spoiler from the Fallout show, so just skip ahead if you haven't watched it yet. Alright, after playing through any of the Fallout games, every fan will have at least this question on their mind. Who shot first and started the Great War? But in 2023, series creator Tim Cain stated that China were the ones who dropped the first nuclear bombs due to the US's alleged bioweapon developments. Like a certain FEV. And I'm gonna be honest, I was actually banking on the US being the ones to shoot first, but, whatevs. But despite who exactly shot first, there were a couple other theories as to who instigated the Great War. Once again, some claim the aliens, some claim that the Enclave did it, and others claim that it was vault-tec, which, after the Fallout show's release, was actually confirmed to be the case. Like Robco or General Atomics talking about the potentials of, just getting a little nuclear holocaust going, just getting some wacky vault ideas out of the way. And it's pretty cool that a lot of fans just caught on to this idea pretty quick, and another instance of theories just becoming facts. Am I right? Oh. Ron Perlman, the Hellboy. The only man to wear these shoes and make you feel insecure about your Shrocs. And actually, if you have Shrocs, you probably don't know what shame is. He's been a part of the Fallout series since the very beginning, acting as a narrator for quite a few of the games.
Your bones are scraped clean by the desolate wind. Your vault will now surely die, as you have.
And actually having a physical role, or whatever counts for a physical role in video games, in Fallout 4 as he's playing an Anchorman. But in Fallout New Vegas, there's actually a stand-in character named Ron the Narrator, who is used for both the intro and outro slides, and is only visible through either bugging the game out or console commands. It's a bit of a weird addition that I guess acts as a little bit of an insight as to how the game works during these title card moments. I mean, there's just a funny little guy standing behind the pictures of you wiping out an entire culture. Don't know what to say. Institute Spybirds. In Fallout 4, there are a ton of irradiated animals. You got your ghoul dogs, your ghoul whales, your ghoul ghouls, and normal cats, which, yeah, sure, no, that tracks. But besides these clear eldritch abominations, birds are pretty much the only species in the Boston Wasteland that seem to have gone pretty much unmutated. But it all becomes much clearer once you explore the institutes. While exploring the SRB, you'll find a wall of security cameras that show various places around the Commonwealth. And they're all shot at some pretty obscure angles, to be sure. This little display has actually led a lot of fans to believe that the birds of the Wasteland are actually Institute spy birds meant to keep an eye on the people of the Commonwealth. And this is actually seemingly confirmed, as Deacon will comment on when taking him underground or in any tunnel area, that the cover will keep them from the Watcher's eyes. By the way, that's what the birds are called, they're Watchers. But whether this theory is actually true is still kind of up in the air. I mean, it's definitely a reference to that conspiracy theory that pigeons are like government drones meant to spy on people. Because, you've never seen a baby pigeon, oh man. Although, in this case, the Institute did make synth gorillas, so a synth bird, that's just a gorilla with wings and a beak and feathers. Not a gorilla. Could happen. Could be a thing, for sure. Probably is. The Real Goodsprings. Now, if you played Fallout New Vegas, or just a fan in general, then you'll know about the town of Goodsprings, the starting point of any Mojave adventure, the first true test of your ability to delegate the fate of Vegas, also known as the Dust Mountain where you get shot in the face. Well, the town of Goodsprings was actually based on the real town of Goodsprings, Nevada. The Pioneer Saloon, aka the Prospector Saloon in-game, is very proud of its connection to the Fallout series, and has an entire corner of the saloon dedicated to New Vegas, with everything being covered in Fallout memorabilia. There's also a guest book signed by other Fallout fans, and an Xbox with the actual New Vegas game loaded up for customers to play. But the Fallout worship doesn't stop there. In fact, back in July 8th of 2022, the owner of the Pioneer Saloon, Steven Stats, also known as Old Man Liver, which I want a nickname like that, hosted a party at the saloon in celebration of Fallout New Vegas. Over 500 fans showed up from across the world and the country to join in the fun. And from the sound of things, the event didn't devolve into depravity. Big win. And the rest of the town has a whole lot of other buildings that were seen in the game, and honestly, it's just awesome to see the real-world inspiration for such an iconic entry into the series. And something I really want to see from the game is just insane. I mean, they built a whole Hoover Dam for Fallout. Can you believe that? They just built that. It's insane. Those fans, I tell you. Bethesda-verse. Alright, hold on, we're not talking about multi-stage projects. As much as it pains me, Prim Slim is not getting a movie. What I'm referring to is, like every other franchise ever, fans of Bethesda games claim that the Fallout series, Elder Scrolls, and now Starfield series actually reside within the same universe. Now these claims, or more accurately these theories, are based on a few Easter eggs from each of the games. In Fallout 4, on the Brotherhood Prydwen, players can find what looks to be some Nirnroot from the Elder Scrolls. And in Starfield, there is a baseball from Boston. Now Bethesda has gone on to say that these three franchises are in no way connected, they're all in their own separate continuities. Which, I mean, in the case of Starfield and Fallout, I mean, yeah. But this doesn't stop them from selling some Dragonborn themed merch to lowly wastelanders. So, could be. Cat Farm. In Fallout 4, cats are the furry domestic friends that find themselves in the safety of settlements or vaults. But in Diamond City, you can find over 25 cats inside the Hawthorne household. Now, listen, it's the apocalypse. Resources are scarce. And while cats are used to scare off pests, they aren't necessarily good in a fight, and they take up some of those precious resources to stay alive. So, why would this old lady have all these cats? Well, many in the community have gone on to believe that this is just an instance of a local cat farm, and it's not the kind you adopt. It's more the kind you inhale while being turned into mincemeat yourself during a firefight, and the Hawthorne household is not the only place, as there is another cat farm east of Walton Pond. Now, I didn't include this little tidbit onto the iceberg just for sheer shock factor, but more to ask, how worth it can cat meat really be? I mean, a cat alone is worthly 1,000 calories in your average cat, which a lot of these cats in Fallout seem to be, and compare that to a 400,000 calorie cow, it just doesn't really seem like it'd be worth it. Especially with the clear abundance of Brahmin around the Commonwealth. I mean, it's not like they're all that rare. And if anything, the Brahmin are probably worth a lot more calories, just because, I mean, look at them, probably, right? There's, a lot to argue here, but, cat meat really can't be that worth it, right? Vault Zero. In the kinda canon, not sure if it is story status of Fallout Tactics, we would be introduced what is referred to as the very nucleus of the vault-tec system, Vault Zero. Its purpose was meant to rebuild the world through the Exodus protocol by reuniting all the Vault system under Vault Zero's control, which in itself was run by a central intelligence computer called the Calculator. A supercomputer linked to an organic brain. It could run systems for food, water, air, but it can't run Blender for shit. But all in all, pretty advanced stuff. Think of Vault Zero like the vaults from the Horizon series in terms of its pure capabilities. But, just like in real life, the budget for this life-saving technology was cut almost immediately by project heads, as committee members would actually pocket most of the funds from the project, bringing the entire budget down from $24 billion down to $2.3 billion. Which, yeah, that'll be enough to save mankind, hell yeah, brother. This budget cut also came with some directorial changes to the vaults, shifting from a terraforming and reclamation system into what is essentially a post-apocalyptic resort, full of luxury restaurants, accommodations, and even some exclusive hunting grounds stocked with rare animals. Yeah, fuck it, we don't need any of those white rhinos, what were they even doing? This was done mainly because no one actually believed that the bombs would actually fall, and then they did. After the bombs did fall and the war had ended, the Calculator would enter a state of hibernation until 2196, when supermutants would venture into the vault. Just fucking about as usual. The Calculator would then wake back up and view them as foreign invaders. It then decided to unleash its own series of killer robots to clear out the vaults. But the Calculator didn't stop there, as it basically created an entire mechanical army of superbots and started killing everyone in the wasteland. Now this vault is no longer canon to the overall series, but despite the vault's service to the Enclave being made very clear at this point, it does show at some points people were trying to create a system that could help people uplift themselves from the nuclear holocaust that surrounded them. Now I personally think that Vault Zero is kind of a cool concept for the overall series, but I do understand why Bethesda kind of retconned it, as not only would Vault Zero's existence would muddle a lot with what Bethesda wanted to do with the Fallout series, but a lot of aspects from Fallout Tactics were also kind of fuckety. But if they were to rework Vault Zeros into the series again, I think it'd be a pretty interesting inclusion, to say the least. Just don't put furry death claws back in there, please. Please, I just can't handle it. I can already see the fan art. I don't want to see it. Malcolm Holmes. In Fallout New Vegas, there's a character named Malcolm Holmes. He's an NPC that talks to the player after collecting the first blue bottle cap. Now, he's on this list mainly for having a very infamous tendency for showing up at the most random places at the most random times. You know, instances like showing up at the end of the game during the ending slides. This guy will chase you down to the actual ends of the earth just to give you a non-negotiable tutorial. And the real kicker is, he'll claim he's just trying to warn us about more dangerous people that could be after the bottle caps. But when you check his inventory, you'll find the exact same caps. Oh, he's just scouting for his next target. I'm calling it. Van Buren. So Van Buren is the code name for what would have been the original Fallout 3 that was being developed by Blackout Studios. The game would have been set in 2253, and the player would start the game off as an escaped prisoner. And whether or not the player character was actually guilty or wrongfully imprisoned would have been determined in character creation. And there would have been a planned option allowing players to be either a human, ghoul, or suit mutant through their playthrough. And despite all these pretty promising options for a Fallout game, the only bit of the game that was ever made was a 30-minute gameplay demo. Everything else was on its way to development, but then Blackout got shut down, and obviously Van Buren went with it. And for a time, that was that. But then, Fallout New Vegas happened. A lot of ideas, concepts, and characters meant for Van Buren would end up being reworked for New Vegas. Such reworked concepts would be characters like Joshua Graham, who was originally known as the Hangman in Van Buren. He would have been an available companion for the player to recruit, and would have loved just starting shit with people and, by association, getting you in trouble. Events like the story surrounding the Hoover Dam and the inclusion of Caesar's Legion would have also been re-implemented and reworked for New Vegas. It's pretty crazy and pretty cool that despite the project being cancelled, these devs were able to go back and rework ideas for a newer project, even if it's not one-to-one to what was originally envisioned. Fallout superheroes. You heard me right. Even the Fallout series has its own fair share of superheroes that go around to keep the peace. In the comics. What, you think these people care about human decency? No. See, all the superheroes from the Fallout series are, for the most part, restricted mainly to the comics. Now, all the superheroes in Fallout, which I'll get into in just a bit, are all owned by the in-universe company called Huber's Comics. And they've made many heroes, such as Captain Cosmos, Grognak the Barbarian, the Silver Shroud, the Inspector, and of course, Manta-Man. I believe in Manta-Man supremacy. And just like in our world, excluding Captain Cosmos, many of these heroes would form up to create the superhero team called the Unstoppables. This team would go up against villains such as Dr. Brainwash, the Mechanist, and Greg from the HOA. Look, it's not our fault that Grognak drives a Hummer. He takes up an entire garage space, so some of us have to park in the street, Greg! Creation Club. The Creation Club is definitely one of the more controversial additions that Bethesda's added to games such as Fallout 4, Skyrim, and more recently, Starfield. The Creation Club was, or actually still is, basically a paid-for mod store. And not the crazy DLC-sized mods you can just get for free. It's more like horse power armor and some different skins for your Pip-Boy and dog meat. But different. Yeah, needless to say that fans weren't very happy with these inclusions and were needless to say that fans weren't too happy with their inclusions and definitely just saw them as more passive ways for Bethesda to continue keep making monies off these popular titles. But at least you can dress as Doom Guy. I mean, that's not nothing. Fallout Shelter Online. Fallout Shelter Online is a free-to-play mobile game developed by Shegu Games and published by Bethesda Softworks. The game acts as a sequel to the first Fallout Shelter, as well as a prequel to both Fallout 3 and Fallout 4. Because, for the story, clearly. It's one of those resource management, build-your-own settlement type games, where you play as the Overseer, and you just tend to the needs of both the vault and its residents. And you can only get new residents to the vaults by collecting posters. Which, that's how I got my job. They had a poster of me. Where else was I going to go? There's also this hero biography system, which, through extensive grinding, or the gacha system, allows the player to learn the backstories of certain characters. This is also where all those high-quality posters of characters from the Fallout series, like Piper or Manta-Man, come from. Fallout Cookbook. Them be some good eats. Have you ever played through any of the Fallout games and looked at a rat roach and went, damn, that look crunchy? Well, you too, there's nothing for roaches. You too can enjoy some post-apocalyptic delights Through Fallout, the Vault Dweller's official cookbook. Written by Victoria Rosenthal back in October of 2018. Enjoy some in-game delights such as Blamco mac and cheese, baked bloatfly, braised deathclaw steak, buff-outs, something called rock gut, which, hell yeah, mute few crumble, and just many, many more. However, a big red flag is that none of these will give you any kind of radiation poisoning. But like I said before, none's keeping you from adding some of that 239 to the mix, for lore, for the accuracy, for the thrill. Are you a real fan? Eat some plutonium. You'll be fine, if you believe. Fallout board game. Fantasy Flight Games released Fallout, a post-nuclear board game. It's a D&D type tabletop game that features 1 to 4 players who can either compete or work together. Players can choose whether to play as a human, ghoul, or suit mutants. The players can also choose 1 of 4 scenarios for the setting of their game. Places like the Capital Wasteland, the Pit, the Commonwealth, or Far Harbor. Are you telling me that me and my friends can't blow all our money in Vegas? This is breaking my immersion. Anyways, while exploring different locations, the players can gain either equipment cards or special influence cards to advance their character. Each player is also given a special character board where they can keep track of equipment, hit points, and radiation damage. And I swear guys, I'm not cheating, I just keep getting 20s. There are also a few expansions for this game, like New California and Atomic Bonds. Now I haven't played this board game myself, but after looking into it, I'm definitely tempted to check it out, and Jesus Christ.